want to talk peripherally about the state of the world today, how shitty it is, and how the basic level of our activism should be about finding ways to not contribute to that shittiness. Today, I want to talk about boycotting the West. Because when you acquire that lucid vision of the world, as lucid as is possible in all this mess and confusion, and you realize just how truly diabolical the global system is, both economically, politically, and on the international level, and how deeply its propaganda has entrenched itself within and across nations and societies and in the mind space of billions and billions of people. It's very understandable to feel overwhelmed and hopeless, and maybe even think that it's even futile to even try when you think about the scope of the battle that is ahead. But I want to tell you that you will be wrong. So when we talk about rebelling against injustice and moving actively towards toppling oppressive systems, some basic things are important to keep in mind. The first is that the people who have trapped us in this economic system, in this penal colony or prison planet, have had a lot of time to study humans and human behavior. They have had several centuries and have gone through multiple empires to understand human psychology. They have mastered the craft of deception, of divide, conquer, and rule, of our tribal proclivities, of information overload, act of overwhelming you with so many theories and possibilities that you are left confused and not knowing what to believe and who to trust. So the first thing I want to say is that revolutions take time. For as long as I can remember, I've always been plagued by discontent. I've always known that there was something insidious about our planet and our existence, and all my life has been in constant turmoil and dissatisfaction, always seeking for that magic button that will make everything okay, that will reset the world or that will otherwise destroy it. I found some sort of peace by realizing that systems have been so carefully and insidiously crafted over millennia will take time to dismantle. We are 8 billion people on the planet, and you are one person. And like it or not, awareness has to reach a critical mass to stand any chance of a lasting change. However, while there's no secret button to push, and as we wait for the passing of the ages that will always bring with them the collapse of the greatest empires, it will be foolhardy to say, don't do anything, that we should embrace this broken, dysfunctional system, because there's nothing we can really, in the present, do that will change it drastically and noticeably. This is the fatigue and defeatist attitude they aim to achieve. They want you to feel overwhelmed at the enormity of it all and give up and crawl back into your bubble. And if you do that, then they will have succeeded. And you kick down liberation another decade or another century down the road. Because when you look back at all the propaganda and subterfuge, the lies and the misdirection, you can see that at the root of all of this, the thing that seems most apparent as a clear and undeniable goal of imperialism, fascism, and supremacy is money and resources. When you look at the recent boycotts and divestments done on brands like Starbucks and McDonald's, there's no way anyone can say that these things have not impacted their businesses and perhaps changed it forever. When you look at the student protests that are calling for divestment from businesses supporting Israel, you can see how panicked even the Western governments have become. Because at the end of the day, it is always about money. Apartheid South Africa became too expensive to support, which was one of the major reasons it failed and was eventually dismantled. So in both our daily actions and in other more direct actions, like those being done by the students, the only language imperialism, capitalism, and fascism understands is violence, which can be in the form of civil disobedience and denial of resources, money. Because if governments have been captured by corporate interests, then the only way to bring about change is to hit the corporate interests. The first step I've taken in my life, as we still do this groundwork of activism, is to just generally shun consumerism. Because we really do need to stop playing the game. One of the things I learned very quickly after getting my first job straight out of college was that it really doesn't take a lot to sustain human life. Once my shelter was accounted for and I had bought my TV, couch, PS4, all the things that young bachelors need, the amount of resources truly needed to sustain life is very negligible. I couldn't understand why I had to keep on working to buy stuff that I really didn't need or want. I just wanted to read books and make art all day. That's all I wanted. This is why they destroyed our communities and our ancestral methods of land ownership. Because in pre-colonial times, once you came of age, your father gave you a corner plot in a family compound, and on the weekend, you and your cousins went down the river to gather the mud and the thatch that you needed to build your cheap eco-friendly house. Because once housing is solved, there is little to aspire to besides daily sustenance. So take a look around you. You have everything you need. You don't need a bigger TV. You don't need more clothes or shoes. You don't need a bigger couch. Besides housing, you have everything you need. This is why they have planted the seed of desire in our hearts. Desire and ill content. Because without desire, this system dies in its infancy. Desire ensures that we have a 2-year phone cycle, that a new model of a car is released every year, and that we must always have the newest models of everything, forgetting that these things are tied directly to the exploitation and devastation of mother nature, to genocide and displacement, to murder, theft, and rape. I think it was Siddhartha who said that desire is the source of all of man's misfortunes. So stop buying stuff. Stop buying stuff you don't need. Mend your clothes, keep your phones longer than 2 years, and fix your furniture. Stop buying stuff, and eventually they will stop making it. The second step I've been taking is just generally boycotting the West. Like, boycott the West. To the extent that you have to buy anything at all, boycott the West. While this might seem a bit difficult for many, especially those of us who do actually live in the West, just the mere fact of your existence, of living and working in the West and paying taxes, means that you're still feeding this machine of empire. But with very careful planning and just being deliberate about your consumption choices, then you can certainly cut out as much money as possible from corporate interests. Now, what does boycotting the West look like? Boycott big chains. As I already mentioned above, taking cues from the Starbucks action with enough solidarity and class action, we can boycott and substantially damage and even destroy large corporations just by not buying their products and services. And I'm not just limiting this to openly problematic corporations who are in open support of murderous imperialism, but I would extend it to all big box stores. We have to understand that the economic and foundational arm of empire and imperialism is the economic system itself. It's capitalism. Capitalism is what drives imperialism. And even if these corporations are not openly funding or advocating for genocide, it's still them that lobby your lawmakers to suppress wages and cut benefits. It's they who have consolidated products and services by their proximity to capital, and in the process destroyed so many artisans and family corner shops. The lie they like to tell you is that these corporations are job creators, when in actual fact, these people are job destroyers. I think many people have forgotten what it really means to live in community. We used to have shoemakers and dressmakers, doll makers, butchers and coffee shops and corner shops, all owned by members of the local community. And these businesses would be used to put many generations through college while still maintaining a dignified standard of living. So these big box corporations have not only put these people in your community out of business, they also find ways to avoid paying taxes. This is the double harm that big box chains and corporations do to our communities. When next you go through a big box store, I want you to look through the aisles and think of how many businesses have been consolidated into that one store. And all that money now goes to one family or one corporation who perhaps don't even live in the country. That online shopping giant that is hailed as being a job creator, but what people don't see is that it has destroyed the family business, the corner shops, the local supermarkets that for ages families have used to afford a decent lifestyle, put many generations through education, and pay taxes. It brings 1,000 minimum wage jobs to its community, but kills 500 small businesses and 10,000 indirect jobs. It depresses wages, avoids the schemes on taxes, and in addition, gets the government to give them huge concessions for the privilege of doing all this damage to your community. Corporations are the ones who drive governments to seek conquest and concessions in lands that are not theirs. Corporations are the main drivers of Western imperialism. We must do as much as we can to not patronize large corporations. Humans will trade and have always traded, but the kind of anarcho-capitalism that is being practiced, especially in the West, it is such that ensures that only a few people will benefit, and the government is just there to facilitate rather than regulate. This is how a country like Canada becomes 5 banks, 5 telecoms companies, and 5 grocery stores just cosplaying as a country. As much as you can boycott big box stores and corporations, do so. And a close point of this, we should go without saying, is boycott designer clothes and brand fashions. Like, brand fashion is just the ultimate grift, the ultimate expression of capitalism taking you for a fool. You know that these goods are made in Asia. You know you can get the same quality as a fraction of the cost in these same countries. Clothing is primarily functional and is really not an expression of your value or your worth as a human being. And even when you use clothing as a form of expression of personality, you can do it without giving your money to murderous corporations. Stop buying brand clothing, except it's from a small, traceably ethical designer. As a society, I think we need to start shaming people who wear designer clothes. So to round up that point, as much as you can, boycott big box stores and corporations. A lot of the time, these corporations are not even cheaper. It just takes a bit more time and research to find local alternatives. I buy my clothes, electronics, and household items. I buy well in advance and I buy them from China. A lot of the shops on AliExpress and all those other apps are usually family businesses. And even when they are small corporations or even large corporations, I know that China has an effective tax system against corporations. And I'd rather give my money to a country that's lifting its people out of poverty and building a better world for all of us, rather than giving it to greedy imperialist corporations of the West. For my groceries, I buy as much as I can from the local supermarkets, like the African and Caribbean stores, where I know the owners. When it's the farmers market, I go around and I go there and I buy more mainstream items like vegetables. And though sometimes some things are more expensive, I'm happy to pass on the savings from making my own food to buying fewer yet higher quality items from these local shops. Second point I want to make is boycott the mainstream news channels. I don't think I need to explain this one in detail. 2003 was like the Wizard of Oz for many of us. You know how you know that something is wrong, but you just can't put your finger on it. And then you go to the theater to see a production, and the magician's clothes falls, and you see the assistant under the table, and the mystery of the illusion falls apart. Watching the news in 2023 and 2024 was like Dorothy in Oz, seeing the man behind the curtain, pulling all the strings. And you know what? I think sometimes when you realize that you're wrong, it's okay to accept and to acknowledge those who try to warn us, even though we don't agree with them. See, even though some of us still knew that the soft hand of Western government still had an effect on our misfortunes, we still had a little faith in the basic decency of humanity, and thought that even if we still had statecraft and geopolitical games going on, we just assumed it was all in good faith, a negotiation between partners, and the world still working together for the good of all mankind. Very naive. And yes, the right, and people like Donald Trump, who is definitely a moron, and I'm no way supporting him, but he did try to warn us. Can you remember when he was saying, "Oh, fake news, fake news"? So yes, boycott mainstream news channels. They are not there to inform you. They are there to keep you corralled. They are there to keep you docile. They are the most apparent indication that we are truly living in 1984. They are the propaganda arm of fascist imperialism. If you are watching the news, just know that this is the information a racist fascist imperial state wants you to know. The squabbles between the right and the liberal news channels are superficial, presenting distractions they want you to squabble about, while the people who run the world carry on looting, destroying, and despoiling people's resources and planet. And when they talk about really serious things like war, foreign policy, and the activities of their agencies in foreign lands, you can almost be certain that the opposite of what they're telling you is the truth. It's all lies. Stop watching mainstream news channels. The third point I want to make is boycott Hollywood. I know there's already a movement to block celebrities, but I want you to take it much further. Like boycott Hollywood. Don't watch their series. Don't watch their movies. It's all trash and it's all about feeding you propaganda and making you pay for it. There's no art in it. The West has long given up making any art. I recently started, not recently, but a few years ago, recently started watching Korean movies and series, and I tell you the level of artistry in them, the cinematography, the acting, the scripts, the wit, the humor, the lighting are all top notch, and something that hasn't been seen in the West for almost 2 decades. Art is dead in the West. It's all mindless propaganda. If it weren't, then there wouldn't be 15 Avengers movies. Have you ever wondered how Hollywood has so much access to expensive US military assets? Think about that. Boycott Hollywood. Culture is dead in the West. Look to the East. Look to the South. Watch Nollywood movies. Not only does it tell our stories, it elevates the cultural value of our industry and puts money back into the black community. Even if you don't cancel your Netflix subscription, just don't watch Western propaganda movies. And an offshoot of that is boycotting celebrity and shunning celebrity culture. It's not just enough to stop watching them because you think they didn't do enough for war and genocide. It's for you to actually look upon them with disgust that they are complicit, in cahoots with the elite, and part of this propaganda machine that is put in front of you in place to deceive, distract, and program your kids and rob you of your soul and your morality, to glorify violence and lust and the celebration of luxury that comes from the exploitation of people and the planet. They are puppets, and all puppets have masters. They are a distraction and have no real cultural power. Because if you organically have 20 million followers with any sort of integrity and we're fully independent and not a marionette to power, then you'll be able to spark revolutions. But it's all smoke and mirrors. They've been selected and chosen to present to the masses, and they know their masters can make it all go away. Celebrity culture is trash, and you should really just throw it all away. Finally, the last point I want to touch on is personal care. You have to watch what you put in your body. See, living in the West has really brought home to me the beauty of all the things that are left behind in Africa. I see all these videos telling people not to come to the West, but I think most of them are giving valid reasons, but are really missing the main point. If you want electricity, some escape, and just to see more of the world, or to pursue higher education, then by all means come to the West. But let me tell you, there is something about being indigenous to a land that you are living on that you will not understand or appreciate until it is gone, especially in North America. Because I think many people in North America, even white people themselves, don't appreciate how much psychological damage settler colonialism does, even to the settlers and the colonists. There is no culture here, except for a few indigenous people in the reservation still trying to remember their stories and their practices and trying still to reclaim their lost identities. But what we have here is a bunch of fourth, fifth generation Europeans who have lost all sense of indigeneity to the land, who do not know what lands and hamlets they come from in Europe, who've lost their dance, their music, their cultures, and all that's left is forming an identity around capitalism, consumerism, and a spectrum of ideologies on state violence. It has flattened them all to white people with nothing that binds them together. There's no community, there's no love, there's no kinship. Even they have lost all sense of belonging. So what we have is a cold, soulless society that is thrived on sports and politics. There's no love, there's no solidarity. You will find no warmth here. But I think the most dangerous thing is how much capitalism has eaten into the fabric of North American existence. You only have to go to the supermarket to see the fruits, the bell peppers, and the bananas for you to know that something is amiss, that something is wrong. Anyone who has seen real fruits knows that fruits are not in any way evenly shaped or colored. The fruits here are without blemish, unnaturally large, and unnaturally colored. There's this hue and cry about meat, about whether you should eat meat or not, without addressing the main issue, which is the large-scale industrialization of food sources, especially livestock. Capitalism has so corrupted the food chain that they don't realize that their meat comes from actual animals, and they shake and have a visceral reaction when they see the eyes of an animal, or when you say you eat its offals. All they want is a clean-cut fillet of protein. Imagine the waste that is generated in slaughterhouses. How many more animals die needlessly because people are only consuming the choicest cuts? Such disrespect to the animal that gave its life for you, such disrespect to the planet and the resources upon which that animal was raised. And because they need such a volume of animals, they are constantly experimenting with feed composition, growth hormones, and genetic splicing. Everything looks so unnatural. I'm not saying there's no place for science in the food chain in improving the quality of the yield, but I want you to think about the events of the last few years, the wars, the pandemic, and then tell me if you do trust these big corporations, these big governments with your food source. I want people to realize that we have genetic markers. You can tell the DNA of a black person from a white person. You can tell a Nordic person from a Slavic person. And you can tell a North African from a West African. See, I came to Canada and it really puts into perspective how insidious colonialism and white supremacy is. Canada is a massive country. And you just wonder, why didn't they share the land? Like there's enough land for two nations here and two civilizations. So why didn't they just share the land? Why doesn't Israel actually want to share the land with the Palestinians? Because these states are founded on racism and the idea of supremacy. Israel, even without violence, has been known to expose Sephardic Jews to radiation and to sterilize Ethiopian Jews. We've had the Tuskegee experiment on black Americans, the deliberate sterilization of Kenyan women, and the tainted polio vaccines in northern Nigeria, because it cannot be a white country if the whites are a minority. So I want you to understand that people of color have higher birth rates than people of European descent. We are outbreeding them, and there have been rumors of biolabs in South Africa and Ukraine. And then I want you to think carefully about your food source and what you put into your body in this racist settler colonialist project that is North American West. Even if that's too much into the realm of conspiracy theory for you. I want you to understand that state capture is very much in force in the West. The government serves the corporations and not the people, so they do not have the duty of care to you. It is really not their duty to keep you safe, nor is it their concern if you are unhealthy or not. As a matter of fact, your illness feeds the medical complex, the hospitals, the pharmacies, and the drug companies that finance their election campaigns. Go to a hospital here, and all they do is try to put you on a lifetime subscription to one drug or the other. So, as a minority, understanding that you are living in a fascist and capitalist society that has been captured by corporations, I want you to think carefully about what it is that you put in your mouth and what you feed to your children. The same goes for your municipal water source. There are many stories about how fluoride might not be good for you after all. But even if you don't believe that, you have to realize that municipal water is wastewater recycled. And so even if they do not intentionally put in anything to compromise your health, there's always almost certainly the tendency to overfilter and to chemically overtreat the water just to make sure that everything dies. So it's really not a stretch to imagine that we are being exposed to unnecessary chemicals. It doesn't cost a lot to buy a distiller or to install reverse osmosis in your house. The last point I want to mention is cosmetics. The beauty industry is a billion-dollar industry, which is built on stoking your vanity and feeding your insecurities. We are natural beings on this planet, and the fossil fuel industry is the biggest contributor to the cosmetic industry. While petroleum is technically formed through organic processes, it is underground because it is full of toxic substances. There is no need for you to be putting petroleum on your body. There are lots of safer organic solutions for your cosmetic care using just 2 or 3 natural plant-based ingredients. There's no need to buy a bottle of cosmetics that has 30 ingredients, half of which you don't recognize. Same goes for your toothpaste. To conclude, I want people to understand that we feed this destructive system that's lying to us, overtly and covertly poisoning us, killing us and our children, and decimating the planet. At some point, we have to take responsibility for our consumption habits. We have to stop participating and we have to walk away. Boycotts, ethical consumption, taking the duty of care, and having a healthy paranoia about governments and corporations while we fight the fight online and in the streets. At the end of the day, hitting capitalism where it hurts. It's money, it's culture, it's propaganda vehicles, the news channels, the celebrity culture are the things that have almost always moved the needle towards a more progressive society.